Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Utopia podcast. I am Chris, and alongside me is Tommy. Tommy, how's it going?
Actually pretty run down with all the information we've had coming out today and late last week. It's starting to become a mind melt.
That's right. Today the embargo was lifted for those people who had information from last week's event about TeamBuilder and Season Showdown, and that's what we're going to talk about today and focus on. First up, before we get to that, last week we had the announcement of the 4 cover athletes for NCAA Football 10, and with that, a couple of members of the Utopia community and the NCAA Football community at large have made their own custom cover templates. If you don't like one of the 4 athletes who are on your version of the game, make sure to stop by ncaaStrategies.com. We have the templates up if you want to download and make your own custom cover for the game. With that, let's get right to the 2 big modes that we can talk about a little more freely finally after this embargo has been lifted following the EA Sports season preview event last week in New York City. The first big feature being TeamBuilder. Tommy, I'll let you break this down a little bit.
Basically, this is what a lot of people have been asking for a long time is create a school. But as we've heard other people say, it's not your grandfather's create a school. This is probably the most in-depth create a team that we've seen, definitely on any console, and it probably rivals a lot of the PC versions. Obviously, they've got a little bit more customization, but it's very, very in-depth for a console create a team. Basically, the way it works is you use a web-based browser application to create everything. You go through everything, creating your team name, your city and state, your prestige, of course, your uniforms. You can upload logos from your own personal computer. You can use existing logos, whether it's a FCS team or any of the existing FBS teams as well. They have kind of blown this up into all kinds of levels to give us almost near complete customization of everything we'd want to.
And this website will launch sometime in June. Do you think this is something that people are going to spend a lot of time on? Is this the new March Madness for people that they're going to be at work working on their created teams?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the thing is that not only can people who own the game go in there and create a team, but anybody in the world can go in there and create a team as well. They don't have to own the game. All they have to do is just sign up for an account on the TeamBuilder service, go in there and create a team, and then anybody can go in and download it. You don't just create a team for PlayStation 3 or don't just create a team for 360. You create a team, and then anybody, regardless of console, can download it. Kind of a neat little idea for this is, let's say you've got a bunch of buddies coming over for the weekend and just going to drink some beers and play some football. You could have them go in the week before and create their own team, and then by the time they get there, you can already have it downloaded to your console ready to play.
And this web-based application, it gives so much freedom, and there's so many opportunities here and things that people can do. They can go in and simply keep their team as is and just edit the rosters, or they can go in and give them new uniforms or possibly design their own throwback uniforms. They can go in, maybe take their favorite, let's say you have an online dynasty, which these teams can be used in online dynasty, offline dynasty, play nows. You can go in there, and let's say you're in an online dynasty and you like to use your favorite team, but your favorite team is Florida, who's really good, but the commissioner would prefer that you use a little lower tier team. You can go in there, everything about Florida the same, except change their roster so they're now more of a cupcake, and you can have more of a rebuilding process. That the opportunities here are really, really virtually endless. I know before the show we were talking about some of the things we could do. I know there's some other things that you thought of with that, Tommy.
Like you said, you can go in and recreate your teams. You can create historic teams. So like if I wanted to create the 1975 Arkansas State team, I can do that, go and find their old logo that they used to do and upload that and use that. As well, if you have an online dynasty from 09 and you actually want to continue it on 10, you could actually go in there and manually type in all of the teams for your online dynasty and import them in. You can set their prestige level. You can, if they've been invited to a new conference, you can bring them into a new conference. You can set their levels as far as TV exposure, things like that. I mean, you can basically recreate your online dynasty. The only difference is that they would be starting in 2009 instead of 2015 or whatever.
Out of the box, people will have slots to upload and utilize 12 teams. But on the website, you can make as many teams as you want. However, starting off, the game will only let you upload and utilize 12. Today, it came out that if you pre-order the game from EB Games or GameStop, you will get an additional 13 slots, meaning that if you, in your dynasty or online dynasty, you can then make 25 teams and then swap in 25 curated teams. And we've heard down the line there will be an opportunity, details forthcoming, but you could theoretically swap in 120 curated schools and use that for your dynasty or online dynasty. So So this is something I think has a lot of potential. And before we go into the next big feature, is there anything else that you kind of want to share about TeamBuilder?
Yeah, just kind of a couple neat little details is, number one, there's over 2,400 different nicknames that you can use for your team, and Brad Nessler will actually refer to those 2,400 different nicknames. You can type in a different nickname other than those 2,400, you just wouldn't have the audio portion for it. As well, if you pick a city that's included in their database of cities, it'll actually use the weather for that city. So if I choose Jonesboro, Arkansas, it'll use that weather for that city, but then if I choose Goobertown, Arkansas, it won't necessarily have that weather. Instead, it would just use the capital city for that state.
So it sounds like they've really thought of almost everything in here.
Pretty much. I mean, they've covered more than is beyond pretty much anybody's wildest dreams. I mean, somebody's going to find something to complain about, but we're getting down to minutia as we do.
Also, the second big feature that we can talk about a little more freely finally is Season Showdown. This is an item that we've heard about in press releases in very, very vague terms. This is very similar to the Battle of the Nations from the FIFA soccer franchise. And it's kind of a mode to help you show off your team and school pride. It's something that you probably have to read the article and story on ncaaStrategies.com, and hopefully the EA Sports team will be posting some videos on it, as it's kind of tough to explain, but really it's really easy to use, and it's a feature that is big or as small as you want it to be. At the bare minimum, when you get the game, go into Season Showdown, enter your email in, select your favorite school, and you're done. And this is something where there's kind of 3 seasons going on here. There's going to be a preseason, which is between the game release on July 14th through the start of the season. There'll be a regular season and also a postseason, which will start with around conference championship game time. After the preseason stage, all 120 teams are going to be ranked, and throughout the year, the teams will continually be ranked. During the season, the EA Sports Live team will have audio and video podcast to try to make this more engaging and interesting to people who are following along. During the year, the schedule will match up with the real-life schedule. Let's say for the first week of the season, Florida Atlantic will be playing Nebraska, so those fans will be battling it out. And there are 5 areas where their fans can earn points. You get points for playing the computer. You get games for against that week's foe, meaning if I went online as a Nebraska fan and played someone who's a Florida Atlantic fan. Random online games, meaning playing anybody. And there will also be 2 web-based applications, the Web Trivia Challenge and Allies and Rivals. The web applications mean that this is now open to everyone in the country, everyone in your fan base. You do not need to own NCAA Football 10 to take part in Season Showdown. Web trivia is pretty self-explanatory. You just go in, answer trivia questions. The more you get right, the more points your school gets. Allies and Rivals is a little more complicated, and Tommy, I'll let you talk about that.
Allies and Rivals, it's kind of neat that, for example, kind of all of us Sun Belt schools kind of stick together. So in your example with Florida Atlantic playing Nebraska, all of the Sun Belt schools can go in there and vote against Nebraska or for Florida Atlantic for that matter. Basically, if all of us kind of group together, then we could all kind of overtake the Nebraska fans. And in addition to that, all of the Big 12 kind of are more rivals than the Sun Belt schools. So Missouri fans could come in there and vote against Nebraska. So now you've got all of these teams that are all just out to get Nebraska in this specific example. So all of these big teams, you think they're going to win, but there's a good chance that they actually won't, just because so many people could be against them.
That's right. I think Allies and Rivals really kind of levels the playing field. And of these 5 areas that we mentioned, it's a best of 5. So right away off the bat, I think Allies and Rivals opens it up to the smaller schools. As you're playing games, there are several ways to earn, I believe they call these extra credits for your teams. The categories are skills. If you make successful user plays, you will get points. Strategy, if you successfully utilize and implement setup plays, defensive keys, and game planning features, you'll get points. Sportsmanship is a big one. Don't run up the score, don't pass the ball with a big lead, kick on 4th down when appropriate, and you'll be fine. You get points. However, if you don't do it, you can get negative points, which will hurt you and your school. So that's something I really love about this mode, is that sportsmanship and playing the game correctly is such a factor. Underdog, if you win the game as an underdog, you will get points. Loyalty, play with your favorite team. You get points and benefit that way. And also ESPN Classics. If you play a game that's really close and exciting, if the game says it's one of your top 10 classic games or you get points for it, you'll get Season Showdown credits for an ESPN Classic. This is something that when you go online, everyone will have a little card next to their name showing off their point totals for Season Showdown, their point total for their team, strategy, and sportsmanship. The sportsmanship is a big one because then when you look at it, you can tell if those players go for it on 4th down all the time, if they play according to the rules. This is something that I think is a feature that was often much maligned early on when we first heard about it in the press releases. However, the more I've learned about it, I think it's something that I think will take off throughout the year. With that, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Utopia podcast, but before we do, Tommy, it's time once again for our countdown. How many days are we away from the release of NCAA Football 10?
We are actually exactly 11 weeks away, 77 days away from the release of NCAA Football 10.
For Tommy, this is Chris. Everyone, thanks for listening to this edition of the Utopia podcast.